so Venerable Akaliko and myself at the Lokanta Vihara, aka the monastery at the end of the world, here in Harris Park in Sydney. We, like everybody else, are learning to adjust and to cope with the extraordinary conditions that are coming about due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that we have introduced so far is our 717 meditation sessions, where we meditate and chant at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each day, half an hour chanting and meditation. That's Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And the reason that I wanted to bring that particular kind of content was because it's something which is a sort of classical part of monastic life. And I think perhaps up until recently was a common part of most people's lives, that they would have a kind of a regular punctuation or point of spiritual connection during the day. Some kind of point of stillness. I feel like when we created the internet, we created so much movement, so much motion, so many things happening all the time. So we try to bring a little bit of stillness to maybe slow down the internet just a little bit. So this is always available for you, and it's just a point where you can come in and just sit with us and just enjoy half an hour of stillness. And we've got a number of messages from people around the world who've been really appreciative of that. And I know that so many of you are going through such hard times, so just that much, it's already something for us all. Okay, so for this evening, what I'd like to talk about is about the conditions that we're in with the COVID-19 virus, and about what we're doing, and about what we should be doing, and about how we can look at this from a Buddhist perspective. Obviously, it's a big topic, and obviously, I'm sure most of you have been consuming a lot of media about this, so I'm not going to talk about the details of it too much. But I'm just going to maybe try to offer a few reflections on it. The first thing, just let me say that from my point of view, obviously I'm not a medical expert, and in this kind of case, then you should be listening to your medical experts. Listen to your local health departments, your local health authorities, and follow all of the recommendations that they make. The general idea is that if we practice social distancing and good sanitation, especially hand washing, then we stand a good chance of restricting the virus. The bad news with this virus, of course, is that it has a combination of being highly contagious and also fairly deadly, fairly lethal. And so that means that the potential for tremendous harm is really there, and the exponential growth rate that we've seen and that we continue to see is absolutely a cause of concern. So you should not think that people are overreacting. I don't really think there is such a thing as overreacting in this particular context. There might be, I guess, irrational reacting, like reacting that's not going to actually do anything. But in terms of things that we can do, basically the more the better. The more you can stay by yourself, the more that you can reduce your contact with other people, the more that you can just try to avoid it and put a lid on it, then the better that will be. So look at the local guidelines for where you are and follow those as a minimum. And don't think in terms of these as like an absolute that this is okay, but just take that as a guideline, and if you can do more, then that's good to do more. All right. Okay, so now, so that's just the basic sort of PSA, public service announcement to begin with, because I want to make sure that we, that everybody's doing the right thing. Hopefully you're all doing that already, and I don't need to go over that again and again. Oh, one thing I should say though is please don't get caught up in all of the conspiracy theories and nonsense, all right? With these kinds of things, we know there are all this rubbish that's being pushed around. I'm not going to dignify them with kind of naming them and all of these things, but there are content farms in Russia and other places that are deliberately pushing out all of this disinformation. They want to create chaos, they want to create confusion. Please don't be their agents, okay? Don't believe all of the nonsense. Don't believe conspiracy theories and lies that are being spread on Facebook and Twitter and these kinds of places. Look to the good health authorities as your basic source of information. Okay. Now, can I just ask somebody, we're getting some messages from people online that they're not getting any sound or any picture. Can I ask people to just check that, because I don't want to keep wasting my time.
They're getting sound and
They are? Still?
let me confirm.
Because I just had some messages that they're not. How are we going? Sorry everybody. 1 second. Got sound, okay? Okay, thanks Nicola. So I guess it's probably connectivity people, maybe some people. Obviously it's one of the problems with the thing. Thanks Jackie also. One of the things with... so if anybody says this video is private, then you're on the wrong channel. This is on a public channel and lots of people are watching publicly. Okay, great, thank you. All right. Oh, I should also just mention, and you know, I know some of the people who are commenting and people I've known for many years, I just want you to know that I am not used to talking to cameras, all right? I find it very weird, all right? I like talking to people, and so I'm just sort of coping with this weirdness factor for myself. Anyway, all right, so let me tell you a story. Here I am. I am just a simple little organism. And I live in a place that really suits me. It's nice and warm, it's wet, and most of all, there's plenty of nummy, tasty things to eat. So I can live here, right? Good. And I can enjoy myself and have a nice little organism life. And not only can I do that, but I can do what organisms do, and I can have little baby organisms, all right? So cute, right? These little baby organisms, you wouldn't believe how cute they are. Right, there might only be a few microbes across, but my goodness, they're so delightful. Anyway, and so we do that, and we keep doing that for, who knows, a long time. And gradually we change, and gradually, you know, our home also changes, and we change with it. And sometimes when we're in our home, maybe sometimes we take a bit too much, we get a bit greedy, and maybe even we like kill our host. Yeah, it's bad, isn't it? Yeah? That's a bit of a mistake, actually. We don't really want to do that, because when we kill our host, then we don't have anything to eat. So it's a bit of kind of overreaction, right? So we're sort of looking for a kind of a happy medium where we can get enough to eat, but without killing our host. And most of the time we manage to do that. And we sort of get into this environment. Of course, we're competing in doing this. We're competing with all other kinds of organisms as well. Because inside a body, like this body here, so I'm now speaking from the point of view of Bhante Sujato, the Buddhist monk, you know, this body here is, most of the DNA in this body is not human. Most of me is actually alien. And I don't have like radio antenna coming out of my head or anything like that, but we have all kinds of microbes and bacteria and viruses and all kinds of things living in us all the time. So many different kinds. And the amount of DNA from all those organisms is in fact greater than the amount of human DNA that we have in us. So a big organism, a macroorganism, is naturally a home to all of these different kinds of things. So we come back to our story I was talking about before. Here I am, an organism living happily in my host and getting along kind of fine. But what's that? Can you hear that? Oh, what is that? What's that sound? Oh my God. That's the sound of a bulldozer. Oh, what's that sound? That's the sound of a gun. What's that sound? That's the sound of a fire. These are the sounds of my habitat being destroyed. And as my habitat is destroyed more and more, my host dies. More and more of my hosts die. My community, my family is being pushed, it's being pressured. We try to adapt, we try to change, but what can we do? We're used to living in our host. What is our host? Who knows? Maybe a bat, some say, in this particular case. Maybe something else, we don't really know. But probably our host is some kind of wild animal. Probably. And again, I just should add that the science on this is still unsettled, but this is like the theory that scientists have been going on, and which is an explanation for pandemics and these kinds of novel viruses which have occurred at intervals in the recent past, and will occur again in the future. So when my environment is being destroyed and my hosts are dying off, I need something to eat. I need to protect myself and my family. I mean, you've got to admit, you've got to have a bit of compassion for that poor little organism. So I go looking for a new home, and what I see is, those people who drive in the bulldozers, or the people who shot my family and have taken my host to a market or something like that, there's this other kind of organism I can see. They look tasty, plump, many of them big. Maybe I'll try them out as a new host. So I jump over and I try living in my new host. Life's good, right? Plenty of nummy, tasty food to eat. And I can multiply, have lots of little organism babies, and I can live in this host and have a wonderful time. The problem is that because we get a little bit too excited and too enthusiastic, because we haven't really worked out that whole kind of sense of balance, sometimes we eat too much of our host and the host dies. Actually, that starts to happen quite a lot. And because we do that, then the organisms that we're living in, our new homes, right, start to worry about it, and they start to examine us, and they give us a name, and they call us COVID-19. And before that, we didn't really have a name. So here we are, COVID-19. We're a threat, we're a danger. From our point of view, actually, we just want to live, that's all. We just want to find ourselves in a balance. We don't want to kill our hosts, we want to live in balance with our hosts. But we haven't worked out how to do that yet, because we're very new. So this is what's happening. This is the natural process which is happening. And I think it's really critical for us as human beings to reflect that this virus is not something random, it's not something that just happens to us. It's something which is a part of the world of which we are a part. We have always been a part of this world. Those viruses, those organisms, those bacteria have always been a part of us. It's just that it gets kind of out of balance, and, well, some of the hosts are going to die, and that's us. So when we look at it this way, then is this going to, solve the problem for us in the immediate term? No. But is it going to give us some, is it going to be some perspective on who we are and how we should be relating to what's going on with the crisis that's unfolding with us? This is a crisis of nature, and it's a crisis of nature out of balance. When I was about 18 or 19, the very beautiful film came out, Koyaanisqatsi, and some of you older Gen Xers of my generation will probably remember it. And Koyaanisqatsi is a Native American word that means life out of balance. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this life which is out of balance. So this is why these viruses keep appearing, and this is why the effects of this are not something which we can see as in independence. Right? It's part of that system in which we participate, in which we make our lives. So what are we to do? Well, to start with, we have to get by. We have to cope. And coping is a skill we can learn. Now, how to cope with this is, well, I can say for a start, I can say that for me as a Buddhist monk, it's relatively easy, I'd have to say, so far anyway. We haven't had to change our lifestyle all that much. We have cancelled some talks and so on. But mostly we get by, we still get fed, all of the things that we need are still there. So we haven't really had to suffer a great deal, personally. Obviously that's not the case for everyone. Thousands of people have died, many thousands more have been sick, and then of course all the families of those, all of the people who have been put off work, who have lost income for that, or the businesses which are threatened or shut down, livelihoods lost. Not to mention, on the other hand, the people who have had to work far too hard, and especially for the people in the healthcare professions, who are doing incredible work in the hospitals and the clinics, trying to keep everyone going at, as we all know, a great risk to their own personal lives. So these are people who, you know, if there are any healthcare professionals watching, from me, thank you so very much. What you're doing is amazing, and I'm really full of awe and respect. The Buddha said that the livelihood of a doctor was the best kind of right livelihood. So what you're doing is something which is really amazing, and I think for those of us who are not health professionals, it's really important that we make your job as easy as possible, the job of healthcare professionals as easy as possible, have compassion for them by listening to your advice. All right, so if your doctor tells you something, if the health services tell you something, then take that seriously, and don't just try to fob it off, and don't just try to pretend that it doesn't apply to you. Okay, so our lives hasn't been affected too much. We've cancelled our talks and we'll be shifting to online content. We still get most of our food from our morning pindabata, morning arms round walk, and we have I'm going to cough now. Not every cough is a virus, okay? Just in case. Just got something caught in my throat. All right, calm down. We're good. So we still go for pindabata every day. So for those of you who don't know, one of the traditions of the Buddhist monastic life is that we get our food from going for alms. We take our bowl, we walk down the street, and then people give us food. And we do that pretty much every day here in Harris Park. We're very lucky that we live near Wigram Street, the Little India here, and people are so generous and so kind, and we get ridiculous amounts of food every day. In fact, we get far too much food every day, and we can't go to all of the places that would give dana, would give alms. We can only go to nearly half of them in the day, and then we come back to here where we are now. This is the Harris Park Community Centre, where we normally have our Friday night talks, and so we bring our food and we leave all of our excess food here, where they distribute it to people who need it. So we're still doing that. As it happens, one of our donors this morning on the arms round was a doctor, and we asked her about it and whether that was advisable, whether it was okay for us to be continuing doing that, and she seemed to feel that it was okay for the time being for us to continue that. So I think for me that's something which is, I think it's an important thing to retain some kind of normalcy, and to retain that kind of the Sangha is like a public symbol. And to me that's a service that we can do for people. So I'm happy to continue that as long as it doesn't pose any health risk. Okay, so how to cope? Well, now I'll speak to some of you, and I'm sure many of you are now finding yourselves with maybe extra free time, things that nothing much to do. Maybe you're laid off work, or maybe you don't have to go into university, or just things have slowed down or whatever, and you have lots of extra time. So do we have the religion for you? Okay, now number one is you can meditate. Fantastic, right? Now you can gainfully use up many hours of your day in meditation. Isn't that wonderful? And one of the more one of the, I guess, less insightful comments in the history of Buddhist studies was when the Pali scholar Carolyn Reese Davids, in the early days of studying Pali, was so mystified by this thing called meditation, had no understanding of what they're actually doing when they're meditating, and so she hypothesized that the Buddha told the monks to watch their breath coming in and out because they were so bored during the day he had to give them something to occupy their time. So that was like one of the early Western theories of meditation, safe to say. It's not one that widely took on. But you have free time. We've been teaching you meditation for years. Yeah? Go and do it. Do some meditation, do some practice. Yeah? Take some time. If you need to, schedule some regular meditation time. We have our 717 program. Join us for that if you can. If that's not convenient or you want other things, some people have asked us to sit for longer in the 717 program. Look, we're going to keep it at that half an hour for now, but for yourselves, keep on doing it for as long as you like and as long as you can. And so this is, of course, is the number one thing to do. What else is there? Well, I think just ordinary advice is good. Make sure you get some exercise. Make sure you don't just sort of sink into despondency. I think it's important because this might be quite long term, right? I mean, if we're just talking like a week or something like that, it's not such a big deal. But we may be talking about several months, and even if we recover from this one, then similar conditions will come back again. There's no doubt about that. And so the skills we learn will be useful in the future. So something to do. Get yourself something to do. And this is some advice that I regularly give to young monks. And when young monks show up at the monastery, very often people are very idealistic, and they think that they're just going to be going and meditating all day, every day. And look, great, and that's fantastic. And if we can meditate all day, every day, then that's brilliant. But the reality is that we don't do that for their whole life. And if we look in the Vinaya and the accounts of the monk's life from the time of the Buddha, then there's no sense that that's what everybody did in those days either. The Buddha never said to the monks or to the nuns, just meditate all day, every day, and never do anything else. Right? They had various things that they would do. Looking after the monastery, sewing the robes, walking from place to place, teaching, memorizing texts, and so on and so forth. And so think about it and think of something that you can do that's going to be wholesome and productive, and that's going to give you some sort of sense of purpose for this time. Many of you know I've recently spent 2.5 years in Chimay in Taiwan translating the Pali texts, and at that time I sort of gave myself that space to do that translation. And people are like, well, how can you do that kind of work? Well, I didn't have anything else to do. And I can honestly say that I woke up every day enthusiastic and eager to do that work. And I don't think I ever went through a period of like translator's block or something like that where I was like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. It was just something I loved doing and I wanted to do it more. I just felt a bit disappointed at the end. I thought, oh, I wish there were some more suttas that I could translate. So find something for yourself. Maybe it's reading suttas. Great. Maybe it's, I tell you what, if you're really, really, really bored, maybe you want to learn Pali grammar. I'm just saying it might be the opportunity of a lifetime, okay? I will admit that on occasion, on a long flight, that I have taken with me a book of Sanskrit grammar under the theory that on a boring flight is the most likely time that I'm going to be studying Sanskrit grammar. So that might be a theory. And if people out there are interested in learning Pali, let me know, and we can maybe arrange some online Pali classes, and we can see whether studying Pali grammar is less dull than doing literally nothing. Okay, so learning Pali, studying suttas, Teach yourself to cook, essential survival skill, right? Very important. Grow some vegetables, also essential survival skills. Yeah? If you don't have a garden, get yourself some pot plants and grow some vegetables or some herbs and things like that. Learn to crochet, learn to knit, learn to sew. Yeah? And these are all valuable and useful skills that you can do. Even more than that, have a look around you in your environment and your community and see, is there anything that you can contribute? One of the big sources of like boredom and depression and so on, it comes from a feeling of purposelessness, that we don't have anything that we can do. And again, I just have to say that that isn't a problem for me. I always have far too many things to do. And so if you're feeling like, what can I do? How can I help? Then have a look around. And I'm sure that you have many things that you can offer that's going to be valuable for people. Now, here in Australia, I think it's fair to say that in Australia, as a Buddhist community, that we're somewhat underdeveloped and under-resourced in terms of community support. Now, that's probably not true for all communities. I'm sure, different communities are organised in different ways, but often that's true. This morning, as it happens, I'm as part of the Australian Sangha Association, I participate in a series of meetings and discussions with Multicultural New South Wales under the auspices of Minister for Multiculturalism, Jeff Lee. And they have a religious leaders forum, and we meet sort of every so often. And since the coronavirus has been happening, we've been meeting online or via teleconference. And we had a meeting this morning, and so we hear from the different religious communities, from the Anglicans Uniting Church, the Catholics, the Zoroastrians, the Muslims, the Jews, the Hindus, the Sikhs, and everybody is there. And of course, everybody is facing similar kinds of issues. But one thing that is true is that probably in some of the better established religions in Australia, especially the Christian religions, that the social services and so on are better developed. And they're finding a lot of difficulties in maintaining their services, having to look after isolated people, having to maintain things like kitchens where they're feeding the poor, all of these kinds of things. So, if you have that time and you're looking for something to do, then just have a look around in your area and your community, and then see if there's something that you can contribute in terms of volunteering. And community contributions. If it's within a Buddhist context, that's great, but if it's in some other kind of context, then that's also fine. And volunteering and service is so important, really, both for our own spiritual development and also for the health of the community as a whole. Yeah, I think one of the big problems, and I don't want to get too distracted on this, but for me, one of the big my kind of bugbears in terms of what we have chosen to do as a society is that we have chosen to turn all of our human relations into economic transactions, and that's just wrong. That shouldn't be the case. Human beings are not primarily economic animals. Long way before we're economic animals, we are social animals. And we should relate to each other on that social basis of care and helping and friendship. And so to support those local community groups, whoever they may be, a really good example right here now with the local Harris Park Community Centre. So these kind of little community groups are the thing that's holding our society together in these times. Okay, so these are some tips and tricks for you in terms of maintaining some sense of equanimity and emotional wholeness during this time. As just on a more kind of I guess a psychological or emotional level, I think it's important also to just really consciously develop a sense of forgiveness and acceptance, because none of us know what we're doing, and the government doesn't know what they're doing. The doctors, they're doing their best with the information that they have, but the amount of information we have about this situation is really small, and it's changing on a daily basis. So there's so many things that we don't know. To assume goodwill and to participate with others on a basis of goodwill rather than assuming the worst all the time. And I think this is really important that we do that. With the people that we live with, to be very forgiving of them and to be very understanding. We'll be going through some times, and if we're locked up and closeted with other people for long periods of time, then stuff will happen and you'll have some disagreements and you'll have some arguments and you'll be like, I really would like to walk out dramatically with a flourish right now, but we're kind of socially isolating, so I can't. And then you just have to stay there. So, oh well, then we have to learn to deal with those things. So some metta, some forgiveness, this is really important, yeah? And just understanding that the stresses of a situation like this are going to manifest in all kinds of ways that we can't predict, and that we are going to internalize the tension, we're going to internalize the dukkha, we're going to internalize that imbalance, and we're going to act out on those in ways that we don't really know or can't really predict. And that's going to happen to all of us. It's just how people are built. It's just the way that humanity's kind of learned to cope. So don't be surprised about this, and don't kind of overreact to what the kind of people around you are doing, and don't be surprised when you see people acting out in kind of dysfunctional or weird ways. What was weird or extreme a few months ago is normal now. And the behavior of humans is changing massively. Probably this is the greatest change in human behavior in a short time in history. I mean, that's arguable, but certainly one of them. How do we get so many people to behave in such a different way in such a short amount of time? And so when you're pushing in this way and trying to get people going on, then it's going to be exploding out, and the emotions and energy things are going to be going out in different kinds of ways, and we have to expect that. So just have some forgiveness, have a lot of patience, and don't forget that for us as Dhamma practitioners, then we at least have something. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for us, but it does mean that we've got something. We have the Noble Eightfold Path, we have the practice of meditation, we have the practice of mindfulness. We have at least we have the understanding that to relate to each other out of love is better than relating out of hate. We have the understanding that if we work together, it's better than if we work apart. We have the knowledge and we have the understanding that all of these things that are happening are part of nature. And so all of these things give us at least something, at least a start in terms of having the tools and the capacity to be able to cope with things. And that means that not only can we do that for ourselves, but we can also do that for the people around us. That we can also be a refuge for those around us. And I'm now speaking to every person out there, and for you to recognize that your meditation, your stillness, your kindness, your practice of virtue, these things are a rock and a refuge for all of the people around you and all of the people that you come into contact with. I'm not talking about like proselytizing Dhamma or converting anyone to Buddhism or anything like that. I'm just talking about having that sense of emotional wholeness and emotional centeredness. And to the extent that we can bring that into our lives is the extent that we can hold a space of sanity and peace within the craziness and the chaos. So this is something that we can all do as human beings and as Dhamma practitioners. I began this little talk this evening talking about the experience of a COVID-19 virus being that organism. And think think outside, your experience. Like when something like this happens and we get very kind of stressed, the tendency is for us to retract, to contract our experience, and just be worried and concerned about where we are at and what we can get and how we can get by. And so I'm asking you to extend that. Remember, the Buddha always spoke about all beings and all sentient beings. Look around at the world around us and look at that bigger perspective. And for many years, as most of you will know, I've been speaking about climate change, and I've been speaking about the dangers of the damage and the destruction that we've been bringing to the environment. Here in Sydney, we've lived through the worst fires ever in history. We lived through smoke. I wasn't here, I shouldn't say we've lived through it. These guys lived through it. I was overseas, happily in a castle in Belgium at the time, but nevertheless, the people of Sydney did. Fire and smoke. We've had terrible storms. We've had floods. We've had where we are in Harris Park, like right here, 46 degree heat, and now a pandemic. Okay, and look, the Dhamma says we're all going to die one day. It's all impermanent. We're all going to get old. We're all going to get sick. We're all going to die. This is natural, but we're still here. You haven't got us yet, all right, Mara. All right, we've got our eye on you. Yeah, we know what you want. And, how do we understand this? Like, a lot of people, when they relate to these, they will want to use a kind of a soothing language. They want to say, well, everything's under control, we'll get through this, and all of these kinds of things. Personally, I don't really like using that kind of language. Why? Thousands of people are dead. It's not under control for them. It's not okay for them. It's not okay for their families. It's not okay for the people who have suffered severe illness, thousands more. It's not okay for the probably tens or hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, who will get severely sick from this virus in coming weeks. And so if we say we're going to be okay, we're eluding those people from our history. Life is like this, and we will experience old age, sickness and death. That's how it goes. Our response as Dhamma practitioners is to understand this. The noble truth of suffering is parinyeya, to be fully known, to be known all the way through. So as Dhamma practitioners, we don't try to hide from the truth, we don't try to gloss it up, we don't try to pretty it up. The truth is as it is, and we learn to accept that. We don't make it worse than it is, we don't make it better than it is, we just look at it, okay, this is what's happening. I have said at the beginning of the talk that this virus is a symptom of the unbalance of nature. If you want to read more about that, then as always, I recommend The Guardian for this kind of information. There was, if you look under the climate change articles in The Guardian, there was an article a couple of weeks, probably 4 or 5 days ago that talked about this. And so we are seeing this unraveling and displacing of the balance of nature in which we participate, in which we live. And that's something which has been ongoing for a long time, and it's something which is still accelerating. One of the consequences of the economic downturn of the virus will be that the economy will slow down for a short period of time, and most likely it will contract, and most likely it will recover towards the end of the year or something like that. And most likely what we'll see is that the CO2 emissions levels will go down for a short period of time. And people will say, hey, look, at least there's some good side of it. But the problem is that the lesson that people will draw from that is almost certainly entirely the wrong lesson. The real lesson to be drawn from that is that, as far as we know, there is one effective way of reducing CO2 emissions, and preserving the environment and preventing climate change. Only one, and that is contracting the economy. If we want to have a livable planet in the future, we have to shrink the economy. We have to embrace negative economic growth. We have to have less money, smaller houses, fewer cars, fewer overseas trips, less of everything. This has been the value that I've lived by my entire life. Not just the value that I live as a monk, but the reason I became a monk. Because long before I was a monk, I was already aware that we needed to shift and we needed to live in a way that was much more radically simple than we are living today. We're living our lives out of balance. It's as simple as that. And we need to bring our lives back into balance. How we do bring our lives back into balance is through simplicity. It's through giving up. It's through renunciation. In Buddhism, renunciation is a part of the Eightfold Path. It's part of the second factor, right intention of the Eightfold Path. And we usually think of renunciation as being something that's for the monastics, something for monks and nuns to give things up. But we're all going to be having to practice, right now, what you're experiencing with work contracting, having to live at home, maybe some of you have lost your jobs, economic hardship that you're going through. This is renunciation. This is letting go. So we can fight against this. We can try to recover, try to put our economy back on track, which is, of course, what everybody will be trying to do. Or we can recognize that this is a sign that nature is sending us that we need to live our life in balance. And a life lived in balance is a life that's radically simpler. It's a life that is content with much less. And I know that this is a hard message to hear, especially in times when, for many of you, you're going through times when you don't have enough. You can't pay the bills, and you can't make the repayments on loans, or you can't buy enough to buy food. And I understand this is a case. And I have. Obviously we need to be able to do those basics. The fact that our society has not been structured so that people can supply those basics is of course part of the problem. So we need to have enough, but we shouldn't have too much. That's the point. So we need to figure out, how do we as a people live in a way that we can be in harmony with all of the other creatures on our planet. Just as this virus, the COVID-19 virus, which I don't know, for all I know, maybe in me, I don't know, maybe in you, that virus just wants to be in balance. It doesn't want to kill its host. The state of nature for that virus is the state of living in balance with its host. For we as human beings, our host is the planet. And we too just want to live in balance with our host. For us to kill our host is not optimal, just as for the virus to kill its host is a bad outcome for the virus. It doesn't want that. It wants to have enough. So it doesn't mean that we can't have something, because we are a part of this planet and we share in the abundance of life that is this planet of Earth that we live on. It doesn't mean we can't have nothing. But we just can't have too much. It's just out of balance. So there's no guarantee that we won't simply kill our host. And there's no guarantee that this pandemic is not just a sign that this is happening. What we do have as human beings is intelligence, we have consciousness, we have ethics, we have compassion. We also have a rather remarkable ability to adapt and to change. If we want to, we can make the changes that we need to ensure that we live in balance on our planet in the future. It's not going to be easy and it's not going to be immediate, and there will be more pandemics, there will be more fires, there will be more storms. But if we want to, we can make these changes. If we don't make those changes, it's because we chose not to make them. And we have to take responsibility for that. So, I'm probably running out of time for this evening, and so I probably should wrap up around about then. I want to thank you so much for your presence and for your attendance. As I said, this is very much an experimental event. We do hope to be holding more events in the future. Venerable Kaliko just made an indication.
Nicola has a question for you.
We have a question from Nicola. Now, we hadn't arranged to have questions, but we hadn't arranged to not have questions either. So let's have a question. Why not? Hey, Nicola, what's your question?
Are there any plague-type myths in the Jatakas or Suttas?
Plague-type myths. Are there any plague-type myths in the Jatakas or Suttas? Well, correct me. Sorry? Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so thank you, yeah. If we look at the suttas as such, I don't think so. In the Vinaya, it discusses various times of hardship like drought and hunger and things like that, but I don't know if we find plague so much. There is a prominent story in the Pali commentaries that talks about a plague that had afflicted the town of Vesali in the time of the Buddha. And the story goes that the Buddha recited the Ratna Sutta to dispel the plague at that time. And Ratna Sutta is the chant that one of the chants we do in the 717 meditations. We usually do it midday. So the 1 p.m. chant is the Ratna Sutta, and this was chanted by the Buddha to dispel the plague in Vesali. And as for the Jatakas, look, there probably is, but nothing occurs to me off the top of my head. But it's a good question. Maybe we should do a bit of research and see if we can find some interesting Jataka stories about that. Okay. And do you have any other questions? No more questions. So look, over the coming days and weeks, we'll be announcing some more events and some more discussions, and we're happy to think about doing some things that you would be interested to do. So give us some feedback either here on this channel, via our website, via the sort of central discussion forum, or whatever way you have getting in contact with us. And if you've got any suggestions or requests, then we'd be happy to do that for you all. Meanwhile, please stay safe, please stay happy, please keep meditating, please keep the Dhamma in mind, and please remember that we as these little organisms making our way through life, that's all that we are. And life doesn't actually have any higher meaning or higher purpose. The purpose that we have to life is the purpose that we give it. And the purpose that we give it is the purpose that comes from each choice that we make. And each choice that we make is a very simple one. The choice that we make is, what kind of person do I want to be? The sum total of our life is simply the sum total of the choices that we make. And if we make the choices to be the person who we want to be, then we will have lived a good life. No matter how long that life is, no matter how short that life is, no matter how much we accomplish or not accomplish in our life, none of those things matter all that much at the end of the day. What matters is, what choices do we make and what kind of person are we going to be at the end of our lives. So thanks so much for your attention, and I look forward to sharing Dhamma with you again in the near future.